Once upon a time, Georgia had 3 governors. All at once. There was a man named Ellis Arnold who had been elected governor in 1942, and he had done 4 years in office and was term limited by the Constitution, could not be reelected. Yet his term ended and he had attempted to continue in office. A second governor was a man who had never stood on the ballot, but the legislature had chosen him to be governor by the name of Herman Talmadge, 33-year-old son of the dead governor-elect, previous 3-time governor, Eugene Gene Talmadge, also known as the Wild Man from Sugar Creek. The third governor was the lieutenant governor who had been elected, a reformer by the name of Melvin E. Thompson, 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 who was claiming the governorship on a provision of the state constitution as lieutenant governor because the governor-elect had died. How did we get here? What happened? Well, in order to understand this story, we have to think about the constitutional order of the state of Georgia and how it selected politicians. The state had county-based government. The state legislature was apportioned on the basis of county. The 121 smallest counties in the state got 1 lawmaker. The next 30 largest got 2 lawmakers apiece. And the 8 largest counties, including counties like Fulton County, Atlanta, got 3 lawmakers apiece. This meant that basically the 100 or so smallest counties in the state could band together and elect a governor with only about 12.5% of the total statewide vote. It had been a rule in the Democratic Party since 1917 under a thing called the Neal Primary Act, which put this apportionment scheme into place. But it had been a common practice in the state since the 1870s, and in fact went back to the original Constitution of 1777. Now, this system of legislative apportionment was also used to allocate votes for governor. You'd vote in your county. The votes in your county would become basically electoral votes like the Electoral College. That's how you get your governor. So the rural counties could control all of state government. They could control the governorship, all statewide elected offices. The cities were largely disfranchised. Even though there was a large black population in the state, the heavy black populations in cities like Atlanta and Savannah, where blacks are voting by the end of World War II, are also effectively disfranchised because their votes don't translate into power statewide. What happened is that in 1946, at the end of World War II, Governor Arnold, who had been a progressive, a New Dealer, a national liberal, a man who wanted to modernize Georgia, wanted to run for re-election and couldn't. He was 39 years old. 4 years before, as Attorney General, he had defeated the rustic incumbent governor, Eugene Talmadge, in Talmadge's bid to be elected to a full 4-year term as governor. The reason this had happened was that Talmadge had intervened with the University of Georgia over an alleged integration incident at the university and caused the university to lose its accreditation. Talmadge was challenged by Attorney General Arnold. Arnold defeated Talmadge, arguing that academic integrity and the value of the university to the economic future of the University of Georgia was more important than segregation. So Talmadge went off into the mist, presumably to never come back to politics. But then in 1946, he decides to make a comeback. Ellis Arnold has done 4 years as governor and is term limited and can't stand again. And in the meantime, the U.S. Supreme Court has thrown out the white primary. Georgia, like all southern states, had a white-only Democratic Party primary. The Supreme Court in 1944 had thrown out the white primary in a Texas challenge, and this applied to all the southern states. And old Gene, he doesn't cotton to this, so he wants to bring back the white primary. He wants to see fit that the white man stands supreme and that the Negro is safely irrelevant to state politics, to paraphrase Talmadge's rhetoric. So he seeks to run again. And what he's relying on is the ability to mobilize a core base of rural white populist farmers in rural Georgia to win enough counties that he can get nominated. It's called his Loyal 100,000. And these are the poor dirt farmers that have been mobilizing for Talmadge ever since he had been ag commissioner back in the 1920s. So he's going out to the hustings, and he's going out with a campaign theme, I never want to carry a town that has a streetcar in it. He is appealing to that very base rural element that's largely uneducated, doesn't have a lot of wealth, but does see virtue to its skin color. Okay? He's going to win those counties with white voters that are either in or near the black belt, where black voters cannot mobilize. He's going to do it on the county unit system. He's running. Governor Arnold doesn't want to see Talmadge come back, so he goes off and he recruits a fella by the name of Jimmy Carmichael, who had been running the Martin Marietta B-29 plant up in Marietta, Georgia, to come down and run for governor. And Carmichael's 33 years old, a very bright comer, a nationalist, a New Dealer, and Carmichael's attracting Chamber of Commerce money. He looks like an attractive candidate, but he can't quite put together the rural support he needs, and there are a smattering of other candidates running. Well, primary day comes around in June, and this is back when Georgia voted on Thursdays. And primary day comes around, and Jimmy Carmichael leads the popular vote statewide by almost 50,000 ballots, in part because almost 250,000 African Americans have turned out to vote in Atlanta, Savannah, Augusta. They have ousted the old segregationist machine in the city of Augusta, for example. A group of GI reformers in Atlanta and Savannah, white and black GIs, are working together to put good government into city and county government. And Carmichael is getting all their support. I mean, there are great prospects here that Jimmy Carmichael has put together a biracial coalition. But he doesn't win enough counties. Gene Talmadge, 62-year-old alcoholic Gene, old Gene, wins a majority of the county unit vote and is the Democratic nominee for governor. And then pretty much immediately goes off on vacation because he's suffering from cirrhosis of the liver. Coming into fall, Talmadge machine operatives, the rural county machines that are the foundation of the Talmadge political operation, are getting worried that old Gene may not make it to get inaugurated. So they need to find a way to keep control of state government, not just the legislature, but also the executive. And they're worried because the Democratic nominee for lieutenant governor, and this is a new office created in the 1945 state constitution, is a reformer, Mr. Melvin E. Thompson. And Mr. Thompson is an anti-Talmadge, a progressive, New Dealer, okay, reformer. They don't want him. They don't want Melvin. So they look and they find a provision of the state constitution as amended in 1808 that provides that in the absence of a living governor-elect, the legislature has the authority to choose a governor from the top remaining vote getters, the top 2 remaining vote getters. So very quietly, a writing campaign begins to try and get Herman's name written in as candidate for governor. Actually, I should also amend that in the meantime, the same Talmadge machine had worked very hard to purge black voters who had attempted to register to vote or to vote in rural areas, and also used intimidation and violence to drive black voters from the polls. For example, in Meriwether County, Georgia, a majority black county, the one black man who showed up to vote was shot dead in the streets leaving the courthouse. Okay? There were 24 instances of election-related homicide during this campaign, including a significant lynching that happened, the last multi-body lynching in the history of the state of Georgia in Walton County. So it's a very violent time. The FBI is investigating the Talmadge campaign and the elections in Georgia to look for 14th and 15th Amendment violations. Okay? Very serious business. But in the meantime, the Talmadge machine, having effectively purged black voters or driven them from the polls with violence, is now setting about trying to ensure that they get some kind of Talmadge come January. So they set about creating this writing campaign. Old Herman is sitting here taking care of his daddy, running the campaign, standing in for him, because by now old Gene Talmadge is at a VA hospital in Jacksonville trying to recover from his liver failing. Reporters are going down to visit with old Gene, trying to chat with him, get a sense of what he's about. He's hanging out in purple pajamas and a Stetson hat, enjoying the attention of the press. Goes into Christmas time, old Gene dies, passes away, 2 weeks before he's supposed to be sworn in as governor. Now the maneuvering starts. So the General Assembly convenes in early January. And the first thing they have to do is they have to certify the votes for governor from the election. from the general election where there are no Republicans. Such a beast might meet as a party in a telephone booth up in North Georgia, if they existed at all, up in Fannin County. But they get together and they discover that the official vote count, Gene Talmadge, the vote winner, is dead, so they need to move to the business of finding a new governor. So they start counting the write-in votes. And they're looking at the write-in votes, and they discover that in second place is Jimmy Carmichael, the defeated candidate for governor from the Democratic primary. He's got 700 votes or so. And then behind him is a tombstone salesman from Franklin, Georgia. This is the home of Ty Cobb, by the name of Talmadge Bowers, who is presumed to be a closeted Republican. And then behind him, by about 30-odd votes, is Herman Talmadge. 2 a.m. Speaker of the House gavels the House to a hasty adjournment. They go back in the back room, meet and talk, and they come back in and announce that, wait, we missed some ballots. And even as we speak, an envelope full of ballots that should have been counted is coming here under the escort of the State Highway Patrol from Telfair County, which is the home county of the Talmadges. So here come these ballots, and they get there, and lo and behold, they discover that they read through the ballots and they check in the sign-in sheet. And there is a 58-vote margin for Herman that propels him into second place. The legislature votes, they vote Herman governor. And Herman goes walking upstairs to the governor's office and knocks on the door, where outgoing Governor Arnold is claiming that he can still be governor because of a provision of the state constitution in 1824 that provides, in the absence of a governor-elect, the sitting governor shall continue as acting governor. Okay? Herman walks up and says, Ellis, legislature is elected to be governor. And Ellis Arnold says, Herman, go away. Only the people can elect a governor. He shuts the door. Ellis Arnold goes home to noon, and the next day comes in, tries to go in his office, locks have been changed. Can't get in. The Talmadges have occupied the governor's office. They've occupied the governor's mansion. They've moved in. Okay? Melvin Thompson runs off to state court, to a county court, to file a lawsuit claiming to be the acting governor because the 1945 Constitution has a provision that makes the lieutenant governor acting governor in the absence of a governor. So we have 3 different claims on the governorship, all from different aspects of this evolving state constitution, with different institutional actors, different Jim Crow institutions acting mainly in support of the Talmadges. So Ellis takes up occupancy in the information booth of the state capitol, kicking out the little blue-haired lady that works down there, creating his government in exile. Herman, meanwhile, takes over state government. Melvin Thompson's down the other end of the state capitol in the President Pro Tem's office of the state Senate. The state treasurer gets in touch with the Secretary of State, who has the state seal, and no monies can be spent or appropriated without the state seal embossing the governor's signature. So he hides the state seal, and he's wheelchair bound, having been in a car wreck. So he sits on the thing all day, every day, and then goes home and sleeps with it under his pillow. And as he observed in an interview years later, the Great Seal of the state of Georgia makes quite an impression after you sit on it for 67 days. Okay? In the meantime, the National Guard has lined up with the Talmadges. The State Guard has lined up with Governor Arnold. The state police is trying to pick sides. And the major newspapers of the U.S. are sending their war correspondents down to Atlanta because there's the fear of pitched battle breaking out on Peachtree Street in front of the state capitol. Okay? 6 lawsuits are filed, each one making a different argument for who should be governor, in part because banks are getting competing requests for state funds deposited in them from different gubernatorial administrations, and they're appointing parallel governments at this point. It goes on for 67 days. 67 days this takes place. Finally, the various district courts in the different counties that have been offering different rulings, all the cases are consolidated and taken to the state Supreme Court, which is largely occupied with Ellis Arnold allies. And the state Supreme Court makes a ruling. They determine that the provision of the state constitution that applies is from the 1945 Constitution, that it supersedes previous constitutional provisions regarding gubernatorial succession. In other words, Mr. Thompson is acting governor. But in 2 years, there should be a special election. Herman Talmadge's claim to the governorship is vacated. Ellis Arnold should shut down his government in exile down in the lobby, and we should move forward. Now, what is intriguing about this case, and why it's important, is that it is the last great deployment successfully of Jim Crow institutions electorally. The county unit system defied the popular vote to pick a nominee for governor. Okay. The rural white supremacy machines suppressed the black vote through intimidation and through legal maneuvers that will be used for the next 15 years to keep the black vote down in the South, mainly through the use of the purge. Okay. The malapportioned state legislature picked a governor that had never sat on the ballot, jumping past other preferences and ignoring other provisions of state law and the Constitution to pick their preferred political option, to pick their preferred candidate. Taken in sum, had any one of these institutions failed, the progressives would have won the election outright and initially. Because the rustics were able to seize control of state government, then only get that victory vacated by the courts, it gives the Talmadges and the rustics something to run against 2 years later. And by now, President Truman has integrated the armed forces, reintroducing active race issues to Southern politics and giving Herman a racial issue to run against in the manner that his father would have. Herman Talmadge, running for the last 2 years of a gubernatorial term, routs the progressives, sweeps the county unit vote, then wins a full 4-year term as governor and goes on to 24 years in the U.S. Senate. Okay? The progressives are so devastated, they don't succeed in electing a true progressive candidate again until 1962, when the U.S. courts have thrown out the county unit system, finally giving Georgia a popular vote for governor. Institutions matter. Constitutional institutions are very important not only to national politics but also to state politics. And when they institutionalize old social orders and old advantages, they can carry through and have a ripple effect that carries far beyond the progress of society. In the state of Georgia, it probably forestalled a successful progressive movement on race relations in the state from the 1940s to the 1960s, when Atlanta emerged as the city too busy to hate, and Jimmy Carter was eventually elected governor in 1970. All right, we'll just stop there.
Freedom 101 is made possible by generous support from the University of Oklahoma Alumni Association. Freedom 101 is a program of the Institute for the American Constitutional Heritage at the University of Oklahoma. For more videos and podcasts, visit freedom.ou.edu.